Egypt and Ethiopia are mentioned more in the Bible than any other nation. There's no part of the Bible that takes place in Europe. So it's a book written about people of color by people who lack color. So what people traditionally have a habit of doing is inserting themselves wherever they would like to see themselves. So whoever controls the image of Jesus controls the world. And that's one of the reasons why he's been presented throughout the world as non-African.
You know, I read something, and I want you to finish that point, pardon the interruption, but I read something recently that said, until the lion writes the story about the hunt, until that time, the hunter will always be glorified.
Exactly, exactly. You know, one of the mistakes that we make is believing that everyone who has written the Bible was writing the Word of God. There's no truth to that. One of the other mistakes we make is
okay, now you make that in itself is an inflammatory statement to folks who approach this world, that the Bible is the inerrant, literal 100% Word of God.
That's not true. And anyone who has studied the Bible knows that that's not true. If you talk to any theologians, people who have gone to school specifically to learn of this text, they would tell you that there are over 500 different versions of the Bible, of this one book. There's over 3,000 different denominations where people have separated from other religious institutions because of how they interpret this text. The Bible, as we know it, is a book that was written by man. As a matter of fact, the Bible is comprised of 66 different books that were written by 66 different people over a period of 2,000 years. So this notion that one person sat down, inspired by God, and wrote all of these books is an unrealistic notion. And again, anyone who has studied the history of this subject matter would know that.
Then that really, you know, I come from a world of, part of what I've done in my life is I've come from the boxing world.
Mm-hmm.
That particular statement knocks out much of the premise of religion as it is taught and studied in modern times,
right,
and past times.
Sure. Well, if we were to use a boxing metaphor, most of the people who claim to be religious are really shadow boxing.
Shadow boxing.
They're in the ring by themselves because they don't know what God is. All they know is what someone told him God is. And that's really the biggest issue that we're dealing with. If we're honest with ourselves, if we're truly honest with ourselves, then we will acknowledge the fact that most of the people who read the Bible probably read the King James Version of the Bible. And the King James Version of the Bible is the most adulterated version, one of the most adulterated versions in existence. Most people read the King James Version of the Bible, don't even know who King James is.
Well, which begs the question, if you're reading the King James Version of the Bible, you should attempt to know who King James was.
Well,
and how do you answer the question, who was King James? Give us a little bit about him. Give us his biography, if you will.
A short analysis of King James. King James is a man who would make Adolf Hitler look like Santa Claus. King James was a murderer. King James was known as being a rabid homosexual. He was often called Queen James by some of the members in his court. And what he wanted to do was to write an official version of the Bible that validated his worldview. King James comes out of the Church of England, and the Church of England was established because the King of England didn't feel it was necessary for him to take directions and instructions from the Pope. So they broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and created their own church. And so essentially what you have, if you look at the history of Christianity as it exists right now, is that whenever a specific powerful individual agrees with the mandates to come down on high, they simply walk away from that church and establish their own church. That's why you have over 3,500 different denominations. Martin Luther in Germany protested what the Catholics were doing. He posted his Reformations on the wall, protested. As a result of him protesting, he broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and established the Protestant tradition. And so within the Protestant traditions, you have various streams. So you've got all of these people who say that they follow the same book, but they all interpret that book differently. But when you get to the book, when you get to the original source material, then what you'll find is that original source material came out of multiple texts that were written by people of African ancestry thousands of years, at least 800 years before Abraham, who is considered to be the matriarch within the Jewish tradition. And so what you
800 years before Abraham.
Before Abraham.
Okay.